Did somebody call for a storm watcher? What's going on, everybody? It's Aurora here, coming at you with another absolute banger of a video. And seeing as you guys really liked my last tier list from the looks of it, which is absolutely going ham right now, it's at like 10,000 views, which is completely blowing my mind. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I figured I might as well bring another one this month before, we hop into the next format, which, I mean, next month isn't really going to be too different of a format. We're just going to know a little bit more info about the newer decks, but we might change around some card choices and stuff, and so I want to bring you this tier list and then maybe a different one next month to see if things have changed. But today is a bit of an interesting video. I feel like it's a bit more unique, and this is the November 2021 Floodgate tier list for the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG, and I'm a bit excited to bring you guys this video because I don't think it's going to do too well, especially compared to my regular tier list. However, I do think it's going to be really enjoyable. You might find out some stuff that you didn't already know. You might just confirm yourself on some stuff you already know. But speaking of which, just remember that these are mostly based on opinion and what I've personally seen from my gameplay. And for me and any other Yu-Gi tuber, you should never take their tier lists or their top 5s or anything like that as a definitive list. Remember, you are free to your own opinion. You shouldn't blast any Yu-Gi tubers in the comments of their videos unless they have like the worst opinion ever, like Sky Striker S tier or something like that. But without further ado, I don't want to ramble on for too long. Let's go ahead and get right into the Floodgate tier list for November 2021. So how we're basing this is how good it is against the top tier decks right now. And the top ones are, if you remember from my top 5 list, if you've watched that, number 5 is Drytron, which honestly I'd like to change. Number 4 is Eldritch variants. Number 3 is Virtual World. Number 2 is Dogmatica Invoke Shaddoll. And number 1 is Tri-Brigade, or more specifically, Bird Up. And then there's also contenders, of course, like Sword Soul, Fluanderies, Dragon Link, Phantom Knights, all sorts of stuff like that. Remember, this is actually an incredibly healthy format, and so we have a lot of different versatile decks. So this might be a bit of a difficult or a bit of a sketchy tier list, because there are so many different decks. You can only hit so many with one card, right? And so let's start off with Anti-Spell Fragrance. And so I'm going to start off by immediately putting Anti-Spell in the Strong AF category. So I forgot to mention the categories. We have Open the Gates, which is basically going to be our absolutely broken kind of staple floodgates maybe, or things that are just completely absurd against the top decks right now. Then we have Strong AF, which are some of the better ones. They're not useful all the time, or they're not the most broken. However, they are incredibly powerful nonetheless. We have the ones that are alright, which are a bit situational, but can come up in certain situations and maybe steal you a game or two. And then we have MST Negate, which, even if it's a monster or whatever, this is basically just saying that it's not really good right now, or if it is good, it's just way too situational. And so right now, we are starting off with Anti-Spell Fragrance in the Strong AF category. Now, if you think about this format a lot, we are actually going into a format where a lot of people are manning blowout cards, things like Lightning Storm, Forbidden Droplet, Dark Ruler No More, all sorts of stuff, even stuff like Triple Tactics Talent, which can be really helpful for them if you set up a board with like a big monster, right? And you negate something, then they just triple T and steal one of your monsters and completely destroy you. Because not only can they use it to like beat over your stuff, but they can also negate, like use it as a negate or link away with it. Anyways, it's kind of crazy. And so Anti-Spell is one of those cards that people are actually starting to put in their side deck now for games 2 and 3. Because Anti-Spell completely shuts down things like Dark Ruler, Triple T, Lightning Storm. And if they have Droplet, they have to shotgun it immediately on activation of Anti-Spell, which might like fluster them a little bit, because remember, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is almost as much of a mind game as it is an actual physical game. It's a lot like poker when you have a poker face. You want to mess with your opponent's like mind a little bit, and so shotgunning the Anti-Spell during draw or standby can really help, because if they don't have Droplet and they're stuck with like a Dark Ruler or a Lightning Storm, or even like their search spells and stuff, they cannot do anything with them until the next turn. And also, if you're playing against Pendulum for some reason, they just lose. So Anti-Spell is an incredibly powerful card right now with all the main deck like blowout cards that are going around right now. And so I do feel like if you're not manning it, which is most likely you're not manning it, go ahead and put at least like 2 copies in your side deck if you can afford to make the room, and honestly, you probably will not regret it. This card is absolutely outstanding. So next up, we have the cover card for this video on the thumbnail, Artifact Scythe, and this is going to be our first Open the Gates card because with the introduction of Destroy Phoenix Enforcer in Burst of Destiny, a lot of decks are able to play the Artifact Scythe package. And if you don't know what that is, it's super simple. It's literally 1 Artifact Scythe and 1 Artifact Dagda in the extra deck. And for those of you that probably don't know what Dagda does, if you haven't played against this or with this at some point, Artifact Dagda is a link to that requires, I believe, just 2 monsters with different names, or 2 monsters period, something like that. I think it's different names. And if another card on the field or effect of a card on the field is activated, you can just immediately set any artifact from your deck, which is genuinely absurd. It can't be ashed or anything like that. They have to use Valor or Imperm, and so they really have very specific things that can stop Dagda from resolving. And it's a super simple cost. So like I said, literally, if anything else activates, chain Dagda, and then set something from your deck, which is really, really crazy. And so people will then use the Dagda or some other stuff to make a Verte, and then they'll use the Verte, make Destroy Phoenix Enforcer, or they'll just activate Fusion Destiny from hand. And then on the opponent's standby, they can go ahead and just Destroy Phoenix Enforcer, targeting itself and the set Artifact Scythe, blowing up both. Scythe will trigger Engrave, and then it goes ahead and specials itself, which is incredibly powerful because remember that Artifact Scythe is a lingering effect, much like something like Abyss Dweller, where after it's summoned and the effect has activated, or something like Calamities, where after it's summoned and the effect is activated, even if you kill it at any other point in the turn, the effect will still be in play, which is incredibly powerful. Most of the top decks right now, except for like Fluanderies, genuinely need their extra deck in order to actually play. It's an incredibly powerful toolbox, and some of them completely rely on it, like Sword Soul. And so Artifact Scythe is an incredibly powerful shutdown, and a lot of decks, especially if you can play something like Destroy Phoenix, or if you can make any sort of quick effect pop on your opponent's turn, like a lot of decks can actually afford to play it right now. Again, it's super easy to get the Scythe, and you don't even need to make the Dagda if you draw it, which is incredible. And so for that reason, Artifact Scythe is going up at the top, which is very funny because if you guys don't know, my first locals deck was Hat, and I played 3 Moral Attack, 2 Scythe, and every time I resolved Scythe off of Sanctum, it was like, chef's kiss. But anyways, that does it for Artifact Scythe. Now we're going to go to Bagooska, and Bagooska, I would like to put in the alright category. And so the reason is Bagooska isn't too oppressive of a card anymore. A lot of decks can actually just swarm the field with things from their hand, things like Bird Up, Virtual World, all that stuff. And then they can just immediately Link Climb. And as you know, Bagooska doesn't do anything in Link monsters because they must be in defense to have their effects negated, and Links can't be put into defense. And so Bagooska is usually used for niche situations, like I have the stuff for a rank 4, however I don't exactly know what I want to go into, or there's no really other option, like maybe Dweller doesn't work on them. And it's also good in rogue decks that can play things like Parallel Exceed, because you can always go your full Link combo, right, and then you can Parallel Exceed at some point, and then you can also sit on the Bagooska, which is actually pretty strong against mostly other rogue decks. However, the top decks right now aren't completely destroyed by Bagooska. You got things like Sword Soul can always just long wand from hand, and they don't have to make the token, by the way, off a long wand or off of any of them. So you can always special long wand, normal something else, and then you can go into any sort of Link monster that can beat over it. Not to mention another card that a lot of people are playing right now, other than Dark Ruler and Droplet, Forbidden Chalice is seeing a lot of play right now. Infinite Impermanence is seeing a lot of play right now. And so a lot of the monster floodgates are a bit less viable compared to what they were. And especially something like Bagooska that really doesn't do anything to Link monsters or whatever. It only affects a certain portion of the game. It really doesn't do too much, quote unquote. However, I will put it at the high part of alright. This will probably stay right here while everything else goes below it, because again, it does come up in certain situations and it can just be a complete blowout and win you the game depending on who you're going up against. But if they can swarm the board using things from hand, if their stuff activates Engrave, yada yada, really Bagooska doesn't do too much. We may enter a format soon where he is a bit more viable, but for now, he's going to stay in the alright category. And next up, we have a personal favorite of mine, considering I used to play True Draco. This is Inspector Border, and funnily enough, we're actually going to have one of everything because he is going to be our very first MST negate. And so, the problem with Inspector Boarder, while he is a very cool card, he has 2k stats, which is really nice, makes him harder to get over with Stratos normal summons, and also he is a kind of a mini Bagooska in a sense, except he also works on things in attack position. He also severely affects the player, meaning that he never sees play in decks that like to activate multiple monster effects, so he's usually only used in stun, things like True Draco, and very few Altergeist lists actually play him, especially anymore. And so, Inspector Boarder, like, again, these are based on how easy they are at access in your deck as well, and so Inspector Boarder is not going to see very much play. And then there's also the fact that Inspector Boarder doesn't completely shut things down. With the amount of different decks that can put so many different summoning mechanics on the field, your Inspector Boarder is probably not going to last very long, because a lot of the decks right now, they can just normal summon, go into All Mirage, boom, now they have access to a monster effect. Or they can just, again, like, make a Link 2, probably crash with it, make a Link 3, be over it. Inspector Order has way too many outs right now, again, especially with all of the mass negation things. And so, the poor guy is going to be stuck down in the MST negate section, probably for a good while until we go into a much slower format. And so, sorry Inspector Boarder buddy, but you are going to be our first really bad Floodgate of the list. Now, next up we have Invoked Caliga, which is... I'm not too big of a fan of Floodgates in general. I'll probably go over that like a bit soon, or a bit later, I should say. However, it is kind of a guilty pleasure Floodgate of mine, because I remember when decks were able to put up Winda Caliga back when Invoke Shaddoll was like the best deck for a week. And so this is kind of a crazy Floodgate. However, it is going in the alright category. Actually, I'm sorry, I know I said Bagooska is probably going to stay there. However, I'm going to put him slightly above, and here's why. So, Caliga is an incredibly powerful Floodgate. Having 1 monster effects per turn and 1 attack per turn means that they have to rely usually on having something like Pankratops or Alpha in hand in order to out it properly, especially because Caliga is almost never alone. So if you think of the decks that can summon Caliga, we have Dogmatica, Invoke Shaddoll, and what do you usually see with that in board? Well, you usually see something like a Mechaba and maybe a Winda, actually. If they're very lucky, they can get Mechaba, Winda, Caliga, which is literally just scoop at that point, unless you have Dark Ruler or Droplet, you know. And so, Caliga is incredibly oppressive as a card. However, only 2 decks can really play, like I said, Dogmatica, Invoke Shaddoll, and Virtual World, which Virtual World, instead of going into Dragoon, using their Muddy Mud Dragon and Ultimate Tzolk'in, they can actually go into this, because they can treat the Muddy Mud Dragon as Alistair, and they can use the Tzolk'in as the Dark Monster. Alistair plus a Dark Monster equals Invoke Caliga. And if you stack that on top of a Crystal Wing and a Chuchi, you genuinely can do very, very little without any sort of mass removal. However, because he only sees play in really those 2 decks, and most of the time not even in either of them, he's just kind of a niche choice. And also the fact that he's only 18 wide, so if you can just special 2 monsters and go into an easy Link 2, you're most likely going to be able to beat over him. Really, the card isn't too crazy because of its lack of representation and due to it being small. I believe if it had Winda's-like stats, you know, like 2200, right? I feel like it would be an incredibly powerful Floodgate. However, right now, it just doesn't seem like the format for it, because, again, there is a lot of swarming without using monster effects or anything like that. And also, you can just go ahead and climb into something pretty big and be over it, and with all of the negation stuff right now. And so, Caliga, you're not going to see your time to shine just yet. Maybe sometime in the future, but just not now. So next up, we have Dimension Shifter, and oh boy, this is a great time to be able to play Dimension Shifter, because effectively, Dimension Shifter shuts off so many decks. Dragon Link completely dies to it. Tri-Brigade and Bird Up and just Lyrilisc in general all die to it. You know, things like that. I'm trying to think of other things. Virtual World, all sorts of stuff like that. Because Virtual World, yeah, they have Shen Shen. However, this also affects their things from deck, hand, all sorts of stuff. Dimension Shifter is an incredibly oppressive card. And if your deck can afford to play it like you're playing Sword Soul or Fluanderies or anything like that, you're probably going to be in a very, very good state right now. Because, again, incredibly oppressive. It banishes everything. It is Dark Law, and it can work in your favor as well because it works on both players. And so if you're playing something like Fluanderies, that's just going to be able to trigger all of your guys when they're banished. And so Dimension Shifter is a very scary card. Again, it completely shuts down some decks. Like I said, things like Tri-Brigade variants and Dragon Link and all sorts of stuff like that. Hell, even Sword Soul actually can have problems because they don't get their main deck guys triggering when they Synchro summon, which can be really annoying. Things like Moye, Taya, all the stuff like that. And so Dimension Shifter is an incredibly scary card to go up against if your deck is not prepared for it. And so I recommend, if your deck can afford to play it, if you don't mind your own stuff getting banished, then I would definitely say that playing Dimension Shifter in your, even if not in your main, at least in your side, is definitely the way to go this format. So next up, we have one of my favorite cards in the entire game, definitely probably my favorite Xyz monster, one of my favorite extra deck cards in general. We have Abyss Dweller, and I'm going to put Abyss Dweller in the Strong AF section, probably just above Anti-Spell, because Anti-Spell is a bit more niche in its situations, however, it's very powerful. But Abyss Dweller can be utilized a lot more. But then again, now that I think about it, very few decks actually right now that are competitive can even make it, right? So I'm actually probably going to put it just under Anti-Spell, because Abyss Dweller, while it is a bit difficult to make in the current top meta decks, a lot of them are spamming Link monsters, rank 1s, rank 3s, all sorts of stuff like that. Oh yeah, I totally forgot to mention this. Dimension Shifter also shuts down Phantom Knights for the most part, which is really good. I totally spaced that, but Dweller works on so many things right now. Dragon Link, Tri-Brigade, Phantom Knights, a lot of the virtual world cards like Nyan Nyan, Qinglong, all that stuff, the level modulations of Chu-Chi, all sorts of stuff. Abyss Dweller, especially if you're playing a rogue deck right now, this card can outright win you a lot of games, which is really nice, especially because it's super easy to access in a lot of decks. If you can play any sort of rank 4 package, you can just play a random Dweller and just sit on it, maybe like 1 or 2 other disruptions, and you can, like I said, you can just win games depending on your matchup. A lot of decks are more reliant on the graveyard than others, but just remember to bring out the current thing accordingly. Again, Bagooska is a bit niche, but it can also win you games. So just remember, if you're playing a rank 4 toolbox, you can play just a lot of different things, and you can just summon a different one accordingly. And Abyss Dweller is very good against a lot of the meta threats right now. So next up, we have Gozen Match, and it's a bit strange because it hasn't been like doing too well in a while. But I'm actually going to put Gozen between Anti-Spell and Abyss Dweller in the Strong AF category. And so, this is going to maybe shock some of you, but this trumps almost every meta deck right now. Like, genuinely. If you think about it, Tri-Brigade, they have different attributes in their main deck, guys, and as well as the Leerless being specifically Wind. And so, if they summon a Tri, you activate Gozen Match, they're locked out of a lot of their stuff. Virtual World, a bunch of different attributes that locks them out of a lot of their stuff. Dragon Link, a lot of different attributes. Sword Soul, they all use different attributes. Fluanderies, they summon Ravana, flip Gozen Match, what are they gonna do? Genuinely, Gozen Match right now is a very scary, slept-on Floodgate, because decks like Eldritch and stuff can take a lot of advantage of it. Or maybe even Dogmatica invoke Shaddoll if they really feel like committing to the dark stuff. Like I said, Caliga Winda is still a viable option. There are both darks, and a Gozen Match on top of that can be very scary. And so I really feel like Gozen is a bit slept on if you're playing more of a control-based deck or a deck that has like the same attribute, right? I feel as though something like Madolche right now. Because as you guys may have seen, Madolche won the very first regionals after regionals came back today. And so that was really, really cool to see. You can play things like Gozen Match in a deck like Madolche, because they are, I believe, all Earths, except for maybe Mageline. I don't remember exactly, but I know that Gozen Match has the potential to be incredibly powerful right now. I'm just waiting to see the right deck to use it that isn't Rogue or Eldritch. And so, for that reason, I'm going to put it right up here in the Strong AF category. I can't wait to actually see if it sees any play later on. So next up, we have Imp Order. Moving on. Nah, jokes aside, Imperial Order is probably, not even arguably, just probably is one of the strongest cards in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! Being able to shut down an entire type of the 3 card types permanently, as long as you have the life points to spare, is absolutely ridiculous. And The only way I really like the back row kind of floodgates, like the ones that you just flip up, I like when they do have a cost, something like skill drain, which we will get to in a second. At least Imperial Order does have some sort of cost, however, I believe it isn't really steep enough. If it was 1,000 per standby, maybe. However, being able to go first and then just make an entire combo board with a bunch of monsters, a bunch of different types of negates, and then as soon as your opponent tries to use something like Dark Ruler, Lightning Storm, Droplet, all that stuff, if you just stack an Imp Order on top of that, completely shutting down access to spell cards, there's very little your opponent can even do. Like I said, things like Anti-Spell are being used to combat Dark Ruler and Lightning Storm. Imp Order does that and so much more. It completely shuts down spells, and so for that reason, this is definitely the strongest floodgate currently in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I don't think any of you can debate me on that. Like, Artifact Scythe is up there and Dimension Shifter, but Imperial Order being able to shut down spells as a whole and completely sort of just protect all of your main end board, not to mention that it also shuts off the main way to out it, like Harpies and stuff. Like, spell cards usually out spell cards, you know? However, without being able to do that, and with so little decks running extra deck back removal like Phoenix anymore, or even Unicorn, Imperial Order is probably going to be incredibly oppressive for a while. A lot of people have been begging for it to get hit on the list, to get banned. I don't think I've seen enough of it to hurt me enough for that to happen yet. And so I'm kind of okay with the one of, but it might escalate sometime soon in the future. Just tell me what you think in the comments below. Unless you're a Filthy Sky Striker player, how do you think Imperial Order should be? Is it fine as a stacky one of, or should it be completely banned? Let me know in the comments below. But just so you all know, Imperial Order is staying here probably for a very long time. So next is Majesty's Fiend, and so Majesty's Fiend, while it is a very cool card, I'm going to actually put it in the MST negate just above Inspector Border, and the reason why is because his effect isn't the worst thing. Like, genuinely, blocking out monster effects, period, is very scary. However, again, this list is also being rated on how easily it can be used in a deck, and the Fiend cards, like Vanities and Majesties, they really can't see play in anything. Vanity's Ruler, which I completely forgot to put on this list, basically, I would probably put it in the Strong AF at the bottom, because Drytron can play it. If you want to see a Vanity's Ruler list of Drytron, check out my latest video on the channel before this. We had our good friend Chris on here with his budget Drytron deck profile. I'll probably link it up in the top corner. But honestly, the Fiends are just... they're not that great right now because very few decks can actually commit their normal summon to them because they cannot be special summoned. And so, for that, I'm actually going to put both of them here, with Vanities just a little bit above Majesties because it is, I feel, a bit more oppressive, because decks really cannot fully use them, especially because they do shut them themselves down completely. And so, for those reasons alone, I'm putting them in the MST negate. Maybe we'll find a deck that can abuse them more again in the future. I know a deck like Tenyi's was actually able to abuse things like this, the Earth Barrier Statue, Fossil Dyna, all sorts of stuff because they never needed to commit their normal summon, but now they're doing Sword Soul shenanigans, so, you know, whatever. And so for those reasons, they're going to be stuck in the MST negate zone. Next up, we have Mystic Mine, and I'm just not going to waste too much time. I'm just going to put it right between Artifact Scythe and Imperial Order. One of the strongest cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! One of the most oppressive cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Not as powerful as Imperial Order because it does have more ways to out it. However, Mystic Mine can be splashed in so many decks in order to stall, like 1 or 2 copies. We don't even have it limited over here, which I'd prefer a limit over a ban probably, but regardless, honestly, Mystic Mine is such an incredibly powerful card. The fact that it's getting reprinted in gold means it's probably not going to get addressed on the January list, especially, at least not a ban. And so, Mystic Mine being able to be used like so many different ways, and just completely shutting down opposition if you bait out an Omni Negate, because there's very little Omni Negation in this format. There's like maybe 1 on most end boards. So if you just bait that out, just go ahead and activate a Mystic Mine. What are they really going to do? Though I will not say it is as oppressive as Imperial Order, I will say it is one of the most oppressive cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! And so it deserves to be in the Open the Gate spot. Next up, we have Skill Drain, and I'm actually going to put this at the top of the alright category. Usually, Skill Drain is an incredibly powerful card in certain formats, especially if you're playing a deck that ignores it, something like Prank Kids, right? However, honestly, Skill Drain isn't as powerful as something like Imperial Order. It does technically shut down a mechanic in the game. However, with swarming and effects activating in hand and grave and literally everywhere else right now, a lot of decks can kind of play through Skill Drain. At least they can do some damage and stuff, even ignoring it. And then also, I feel like you should probably be better playing the things like not Imperial Order, like Imperm, Chalice, Droplet, Dark Ruler. If you want monster negations that badly, instead of relying on a Saki 1-of, and you also have to pay 1,000 for it, which obviously life points don't really matter. However, it is a bit of a cost when you could have just played a better card. This should not be here, I'm sorry. I tried moving it over here. But yeah, Skill Drain, it's not the worst card. However, a lot of decks kind of just don't care. Next up, we do have Summon Limit. And Summon Limit, because it can shut down, like a lot of people aren't manning back removal, and because it can shut down making things like Phoenix or Unicorn, I'm just going to go ahead and put it right here under Anti-Spell in the strong AF category. Summon Limit's been good for a very long time, and we are going to a format where, while most of the decks are mid-range and they're not like super combo, they do summon a lot more than 2 times. And so I feel like Summon Limit, if you can end off on a good control board with it, or hell, even if you can make a combo board and then set this as well, you can do a lot of damage to a lot of decks. It'll be very difficult for them to out using only 2 summons, and especially if they don't have any main deck back row removal. And so Summon Limit's going to be in the strong AF category. Very good card. Next up, we have There Can Be Only One, which is probably one of my least favorite floodgates in the game, considering it's such a powerful effect for absolutely no cost. Literally just flipping it up. I'm going to put it actually below Summon Limit, but above Gozen Match. I feel like it has a bit more applications than Gozen Match, despite Gozen being a very good card right now. However, it's probably not as good as Summon Limit because a lot of decks can kind of play around There Can Be Only One, at least find a way to out it. However, Summon Limit can shut that down almost completely. However, There Can Be Only One does stop a lot of decks. I think it works against just about any deck right now. You know, you can stop Bird Up from getting too many bird things going. You can stop, Dragon Link from going too far. It really, really hurts Sword Soul because they normal summon, like Moye, activate effect, chain There Can Be Only One, right? They don't get their token, they don't have a tuner unless they have Ecclesia on board, and so they're going to have a very, very hard time actually playing through that. Something like Fluanderies, they can't just keep normal summoning, and so that shuts them down after they summon Ravana. It is a very scary card still, works against a lot of different decks. I'd say it's probably tied with Summon Limit, actually. Not really under it, more so just at like a sort of even barrier ground. And so There Can Be Only One. It's probably not going to go anywhere for a long time, which is unfortunate because I don't like the card. However, we can acknowledge that it is very good nonetheless. Next up, we have Rivalry, and I'm going to put Rivalry probably under Skill Drain and a little over Caliga because it is easier to play. Rivalry right now, unless you're playing something like Zombie World, Rivalry itself doesn't really do enough. Like, you know, Bird Up, if they're playing the birds and you try to use this after they go into the Tri-Brigade stuff, they can just continue with the bird things and ignore the Tri-Brigade stuff entirely. Sword Soul could not care less. Fluanderies especially could not care less. And let's see, Dragon Link probably couldn't care less. So many decks really just do not give a shit about Rivalry unless you have something like Zombie World up. Maybe it'll be better sometime in the future. However, everything is sort of balanced in their types right now. The best this would probably work on is Tri-Brigade, but mainly just pure Tri-Brigade, and so it's taking a backseat for now. I remember when it was like one of the most oppressive cards ever back during like Trickstar format and Altergeist and stuff, but right now it's just not doing enough. And so, for those reasons, it's going to stay right here in the alright category. Next up, we have our last card, so I should say, finally, we have our sweet baby girl Winda. Look at her, she is absolutely gorgeous. I'm going to go ahead and put Winda right about here, actually. So, Winda is known as probably one of the most hated floodgates in the game. There's so many people advocating for ban Winda, and that Winda is one of the most stupid cards in the game. However, right now, Winda isn't that scary. And so the biggest thing is, again, you gotta think, Droplet, Dark Ruler, Chalice, Imperm, all sorts of mass monster negation. And so there's a high chance people are going to be able to draw that against your Winda, especially if your Winda is only backed by like a Mechaba. It's really not going to do enough. The protection from destruction is nice against Lightning Storm, but that's about it. Also, she herself is not too large, and so some decks can actually out her pretty decently. And so Winda, while she is a very good card, she is not as scary as she once was. I funnily enough feel like she's scarier in something like Pure Shaddoll over something like Invoked Dogmatica Shaddoll, because she's a lot easier to utilize in Pure Shaddoll. But anyways, that's going to actually do it for the tier list, with Winda being our last card. Let me go ahead and let you guys take a look at it for a second here. I'm going to go ahead and just leave that stuff at the bottom, but go ahead and look at this. We have all of this. We have our Open the Gates. We have 4. We have 6 for Strong AF. We have 4 for All Right. And then we have 3 for MST Negate. Let me know what you think about this list in the comments below, because that is going to do it for the video. If you liked it, please sure to leave a like on the video, as I hope to put this video and the channel into the YouTube recommended. Hopefully we can get at least a good amount of support like we did our last tier list, which I know won't get nearly as much. However, what you guys have done for that last tier list was absolutely extraordinary. I've never seen growth like that before, so thank you from the bottom of my heart. Same with subscribing. If you really want to support the channel more than anything else, go ahead and subscribe if you want to see more great content like this, or my other Yu-Gi tubing content. I do a lot of deck profiles and things like that. We've been absolutely killing it with subscribers. We gained over like 130 in a week, and it's been absolutely insane. So it costs you absolutely nothing. It supports the channel more than literally anything else, and we're on our way to hit 500 by the end of the month. But until then, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. This is Aurora, signing off.